A woman secretly saved a wounded warrior, but her mercy drew the wrath of the entire village. And what about you? Would you save your enemy from death? Don't miss this gripping story. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Your support gives us the strength to share even more stories. We're just a few steps away from reaching 1,500 subscribers, and we'd be honored to have you with us. Thank you to every kind soul who's joined us so far. With your support, we share peaceful, heartfelt stories that warm the soul. If you enjoy calm, meaningful stories, don't forget to subscribe. You're part of this family now. Now, make yourself comfortable. It's time for the story. Winter was always the sharpest reminder of loneliness and loss for Clara Weber. As the wind shook the snow-covered walls of her cabin, every sound seemed to awaken the shadows of her past. The whistling that slipped through the roof sometimes echoed in her ears like Mark's last breath. Since she had lost her husband in an ambush 2 years ago, nights brought her no sleep, and days were spent staring into the horizon, wrestling with silence. But that night, the silence she was used to was broken by something else. A muffled moan carried through the snowstorm. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. But when she cracked open the cabin door and the sharp cold struck her face, she heard it again. This time closer, more desperate. Her instincts screamed, "Turn back." But something buried deep inside, maybe the part of her that still hadn't lost its mercy, pushed her forward. With a lantern in hand, she stepped out onto the snow. There were no footprints, but there were bloodstains. Dark red lines stretched across the white ground, almost screaming for attention. Clara's heart started racing. The blood trail led to the old pine grove behind her cabin. There, under the shadow of a massive trunk, someone lay on the ground. When she brought her lantern closer, the faint figure of a man appeared, long black hair half covering his face. His skin was bruised, blood seeping from a deep wound at his side, his chest struggling to rise and fall. Clara froze. He was a Comanche. Mark had died in their attack. Clara's mind screamed, "Leave him, let him die." But then she saw the memory of her husband bleeding out in the snow. He too had been left without help, waiting in vain. Her hands trembled, tears burned her eyes. "I can't," she whispered to herself. When she bent down to check the wound, she realized he had already lost a lot of blood. If she left him there, he wouldn't last the night. The man opened his eyes slightly, wild yet weak. His cracked lips barely moved, his voice like a whisper. But when he met Clara's eyes, she didn't see an enemy, just a human being fighting to survive. "Quiet," Clara said, her voice both fearful and firm. "If you stay, you'll die. Come with me." The man gave the faintest nod, drifting in and out of consciousness. Clara heaved him onto her back and struggled through the freezing night to her cabin. By the time she closed the door, her arms were shaking, but she didn't give up. She laid him on the bed, filled an old pot with water, and dragged it to the fire. Mark had left behind a small medical kit. With trembling hands, Clara readied a needle and thread. The man groaned when the first stitch pierced his skin, his eyes fluttering open. "Why?" he asked in a hoarse whisper. "Why save your enemy?" Clara froze, the thread hanging in her hand. Then she took a deep breath. "Because I know what it's like to be left to die in the snow," she said, her eyes glistening. The man closed his eyes, a faint expression flickering at the edge of his lips. "Elias," he said with effort. "My name is Elias." Clara nodded, her eyes filling. "Clara," she answered simply. And in that moment, their names tied a fragile but undeniable bond between them. The storm outside raged louder as the night wore on. While the winds battered the cabin, the room grew quiet. Clara finished stitching and bound the wound. Elias's breathing grew steadier. Exhausted, Clara sank into a chair. Just as she was about to close her eyes, a sudden pounding shook the door. "Clara Weber," a harsh voice bellowed outside. "Open up. We found Comanche tracks. Did they pass through here?" Clara's heart nearly stopped. The voice belonged to Daniel Hartman, the militia leader. For a moment, her hand reached for the door, her tongue ready to form a lie. But her eyes fell on Elias, struggling under the blanket. To hand him over would mean killing her own conscience. Clara drew a deep breath. "No," she called out. "There's no one here. I'm alone." Silence outside. Then Daniel's hard voice came again. "If you're lying to me, Clara, you're digging your own grave." When the footsteps faded, Clara's knees buckled. She leaned against the door, gasping. Behind her, Elias stirred, his eyes opening a sliver. Danger, he whispered. Clara closed her eyes and answered steadily. Yes, but I've made my choice. Now, inside the cabin, there was more than the crackle of firewood. There was also the sound of a storm drawing closer. All through the night, Clara's sleep kept breaking. Outside the door, the snowstorm howled, every gust of wind shaking the cabin as if it might collapse. The firelight flickered, shadows on the walls danced like living things. Sitting in her chair, her head dropped forward, but her ears stayed sharp, alert at the faintest sound. On the bed, Elias twisted and turned with restless breaths. Every groan split something inside Clara, filling her with more fear and, strangely, a kind of resolve. When the first light of dawn slipped through the snow-covered window, Clara found Elias's eyes open. He was watching her, tired but sharp. Clara flinched, her hand flying to her chest. "What are you staring at?" she asked sharply. Elias's voice was low but clear. "I'm trying to understand what's in your eyes. Hate or mercy?" Clara hesitated. Inside, both feelings twisted together. But her answer was simple. "Both." Elias nodded faintly. "You're right. Both should belong to me." He tried to sit up, but fell back with a cry of pain. Blood seeped through his stitches again. Clara rushed to press down on the wound. Her fingers stained red, her eyes locked with his dark gaze. In that moment, beyond enemy or friend, there was only two people fighting for life. Suddenly, the door cracked open. Clara instinctively yanked the blanket over Elias. It was her neighbor, Anna. Her face was pale, her eyes panicked. "Clara, the militia will be back. Daniel Hartman is watching you. Last night when he questioned you, he saw something in your eyes. This morning they'll search every cabin one by one." Clara's chest tightened. Forcing Elias's breath to remain hidden, she nodded. "They won't find anything here." Anna stared at her for a long time, doubtful yet loyal. "I hope so. I want to trust you." She closed the door and left. Clara sank back toward the bed as if her breath had been stolen. Elias had heard Anna's voice. His gaze fixed on Clara. "You're hiding me," he whispered. "This could kill you." Clara lowered her head, her fingers trembling. "I know, but I couldn't leave you to die. I've already chosen this path." Elias was quiet for a long while, his eyes drawn to the fire. Then he whispered, "My name is Elias, but people call me Lone Wolf. After losing those I fought beside, I learned to live alone." Clara saw the scars of pain etched into his face, deep lines, like monuments of war and loss. She remembered her own loneliness. Hadn't they called her alone, too, after Mark's death? From different worlds, yet carrying the same wound. Suddenly, the sound of hooves outside. Heavy steps crushing through snow. Clara's heart raced. Through the window, she saw 3 armed men approaching the cabin. Daniel Hartman was in front. His eyes no longer doubtful now, they carried certainty. Panic surged. She turned to Elias. "You have to hide. Quick." Elias tried to rise, but the stitches tore with pain. Clara dragged him, lifting the rug by the fireplace. Beneath it was an old root cellar Mark had once dug. She lowered Elias inside. "Don't make a sound," Clara whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Just before the cover closed, Elias looked at her. "If you're caught, it will be because of me." Clara bit her lip. "Quiet. This is my choice." She shut the rug and stood up. At that moment, the door slammed open under a heavy boot. Daniel Hartman and 2 men stormed in, guns at their sides, eyes fixed on Clara. "Clara Weber," Daniel said, his voice cold as ice. "You lied last night. We found tracks in the snow, 2 sets. 1 injured. They lead straight to your cabin." Clara's heart pounded in her throat, but her face stayed stone cold. "I only went out to gather wood," she replied. "Blood?" Daniel asked, his eyes narrowing. He stared into Clara's eyes, searching for the smallest tremor. Whose blood was it? Clara's chest thundered. Her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. But without blinking, she answered, "Mine. I cut my hand." Silence filled the cabin. Daniel's eyes burned like fire. One of his men began ransacking the place, chairs knocked over, drawers thrown open. Clara's insides burned, knowing any moment they might find Elias under the rug. Then one soldier shouted, "Captain, there's something here." The edge of the rug had shifted slightly. Clara lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "It's just mice," she cried. Daniel strode closer, his stare cutting straight through her. His voice dropped low, cold as steel. "You're hiding something." and I won't leave until I find it." Daniel's footsteps echoed across the wooden floorboards, and it felt to Clara as if her heart had climbed up into her throat. He stood at the edge of the rug, bent down, and slid his fingers beneath the fabric. Time seemed to stop inside Clara's mind. Sweat trickled down her forehead, her breath caught in her chest. If he opened that cellar, Elias's fate would be sealed and Clara's would end with it. Just then, a sudden crash shook the cabin. The howling wind outside had slammed a window open, shattering it, letting the snowstorm pour in. In that moment of chaos, Clara lunged forward and planted her foot on the rug. "There's nothing there," she shouted. Daniel straightened, his face torn between anger and suspicion. "I don't trust you, Clara Weber," he said in an icy tone. "There's something hidden in your eyes. Maybe not today, but soon I'll find out." He motioned for his men to leave. One of the soldiers leaned close before walking out, eyes narrowed, and whispered, "If you're lying, you won't escape the militia's wrath." The door slammed shut, and silence reclaimed the cabin. Clara collapsed onto the rug as if her legs had given way, drawing in a shuddering breath. Her trembling fingers lifted the edge, revealing Elias's face emerging from the darkness, damp with sweat, his tense eyes locked on hers. In their eyes, "You're a criminal now, too," Elias murmured. Clara tried to steady her breath. "I know, but it's too late to turn back. I made my choice." Elias, despite his wounds, slowly lifted his head. "You're risking your life for me." "What?" Clara averted her eyes, her lips trembling. "Because you're not an enemy anymore. To me, you were just a dying man, and I can't stand to see more blood spilled." The rest of the day, Clara kept glancing out the window. Snowflakes fell quietly, but the silence felt like the whisper of coming danger. She could feel Elias's gaze on her at times. In his eyes there was gratitude, respect, and deep sorrow. Both of them carried wounds of loss, and though they came from different worlds, they shared that one truth: grief. By evening, the door knocked again, this time not with heavy fists, but with hesitant taps. Clara opened it to find Anna once more. Her face was tight with worry. "Clara, you must be careful. Daniel is watching you. I heard they'll search every house again tomorrow. This time he won't back down. If you're hiding something, now isn't the time." Clara swallowed the words caught in her throat. "There's nothing in my cabin to find," she said, but her voice shook. Anna studied Clara's eyes in silence. Suspicion and friendship wrestled between them. At last, Anna bowed her head and left. Clara closed the door and leaned her back against the wood. Elias spoke softly. "Even your friends don't believe you. How far will you go to protect me?" Clara shut her eyes. "As far as it takes." Past midnight, barking dogs and shouting voices rang out in the distance. Clara rushed to the window and saw torches flickering in the dark. Daniel and his men were gathering at the edge of the village. Clara's chest tightened. This time it looked like a real raid. Elias pushed himself up despite the pain, a steely resolve hardening in his eyes. "They're coming here. If they find me, they'll kill you too. I need to leave." Clara shook her head wildly. "You can't go out like this. You'll die." But Elias was resolute. "I've lived with battle all my life. A wound may slow me, but it won't stop me. I can't let your life hang on mine." Clara's anger flared. She stood in front of him. "It's not your job to protect me. If I let you go, then I die too because the weight of my conscience will crush me." Just then, heavy boots thudded outside the door. A voice barked, "Open up, Clara. By order of the militia, we'll search your house." Clara and Elias locked eyes for a heartbeat. In that look was fear, trust, and the weight of destiny. Clara drew a deep breath, her hand sliding to the axe lying on the table. "If they come inside," she said through gritted teeth, "this won't be an easy night." A sudden flash of respect lit Elias's gaze. He gave a slow nod. Outside, the door rattled again, the wood groaning under the force. The howl of the snowstorm was no longer alone, it was joined by the roar of looming disaster. On the third pounding, the door looked ready to splinter. Clara's grip on the axe was so tight her knuckles had turned white. Elias sat on the bed, wounded but with the fire of an old warrior burning in his eyes. "If you don't open this door," Daniel Hartman shouted from outside, "I'll take it as a declaration of treason. And you know the price of treason." Clara turned her eyes to Elias. In that instant, she made her choice. She opened the door. The freezing storm rushed in with Daniel and 3 armed men. Torchlight filled the cabin with long, menacing shadows. Daniel's eyes swept the room while Clara's hands trembled around the axe. "I never trusted you," he said in a low, icy voice. And I was right. One soldier moved toward the rug, and Clara's heart almost stopped. But Elias was no longer hiding. Slowly, painfully, he rose from the bed. The blanket slipped away, revealing his bandaged wound. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "There he is," he said with venom. "The wounded dog was hiding in your cabin all along." Clara leapt forward, raising the axe with both hands, stepping between them. "You won't touch him," she cried. Daniel laughed, a sound empty of humor. "Clara Weber, you've lost your mind. Protecting a Comanche, that means rejecting your own blood. That is treason." One of the soldiers lunged to shove her aside, but Clara swung the axe down hard against the floorboards, sparks flying. Chaos erupted in the small cabin. Elias, despite his wound, reached for a knife by the bed. When a soldier charged at him, Elias drove the blade against the man's wrist, forcing a cry from him as the weapon clattered to the ground. Clara lifted the axe again, this time slicing the air in warning. Daniel stormed closer, rage in his eyes, and leveled his gun at Clara. "One more step, Clara, and I'll shoot you where you stand." The cabin fell silent, but for the fire's crackle. Clara's heart hammered, yet she didn't back away. "Even if you kill me," she said steadily, "I will not take part in this cycle of blood." Suddenly, a roar swelled outside, screams, pounding hooves, the shrill cries of war. A window shattered, an arrow piercing the wall. Daniel cursed, stumbling back. "They're here," he shouted. His men rushed outside, weapons drawn. Clara darted to the window and froze at the sight. Shadows streamed through the storm, Comanche warriors advancing with deadly precision. Daniel fired into the darkness, sparks flying, snow scattering in the muzzle flashes. Around the cabin, hell broke loose, gunfire, arrows, horses screaming, voices clashing with the howl of the storm. Clara looked at Elias. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, in their faces there was fear but also a strange calm. They had chosen their fate. Despite his wound, Elias pushed himself to his feet. "If we stay here, we die," he said. Clara slipped under his arm, supporting him. Together they moved toward the door. But just as they reached it, Daniel blocked their path. His gun was fixed on Elias's chest, his face twisted with ruthless determination. "It ends here," he hissed. Clara held her breath, the axe still in her hand. The howl of the storm, the chaos of battle outside, and the dead silence inside fused into one heavy moment. And in that instant, one single move would decide their fate forever. Daniel's gun was pointed squarely at Elias's chest. In the flicker of firelight, the steel glinted like death itself. Clara's breath caught. Her grip on the axe tightened until her knuckles went pale, but one wrong move could end everything. Elias, wounded though he was, stood tall. There was no fear in his eyes, only a defiant resolve. "If you do this, Daniel," Clara said, her voice low and raw, "you'll just be killing another innocent. My husband's blood never gave you peace. This won't either." Daniel's face twisted with rage. "Innocent," he snarled. "Their arrows killed my father. Their raids put my brother in the ground. As long as one Comanche breathes on this land, there will be no peace." Elias's eyes burned in the dark. "Yes, you've lost. But so has my people. We've buried our dead too. Our grief is no less than yours. The difference is I chose not to let hatred blind me. You're still chained to it." The words cut into Daniel like a blade. His finger tightened on the trigger. But before he could fire, the cabin window shattered. An arrow whistled through, scattering sparks and shards of glass. Daniel flinched, and Clara seized the chance. Swinging her axe, she shoved the barrel aside. The gun fired, the shot burying itself into the wall. Chaos erupted. Elias pulled Clara to him. "We have to get out," he shouted. Clara nodded, heart racing. They rushed to the door, but outside was a storm of fire and blood. Militia and Comanche warriors had clashed. Torches fell and burned on the snow, painting the ground red with flame. Gunshots cracked, arrows hissed, horses screamed into the night. Daniel roared above the chaos. "Seize them both. Clara has betrayed us." His words struck like a curse. Clara's name, tied to treason, rippled through the villagers' whispers. Faces in the torchlight showed shock, fear, confusion. Clara realized then there was no turning back. Her fate was bound to Elias's. Elias, despite the pain, fought with ferocity. He slammed one soldier down and seized his weapon. Clara swung her axe to drive back another attacker. Side by side, they fought. The bond that had begun in enmity had become a shield in battle. In Clara's eyes glimmered a silent vow. You're not alone anymore. But the militia outnumbered them. Within minutes, Elias's shoulders were pinned, Clara's wrists caught in iron grips. Forced to their knees, they were dragged into the torchlight. Daniel stepped forward, triumph carved into his face. Here they are, the traitor and her beast, he spat. Soldiers muttered, and behind them, villagers peered nervously from the shadows. Clara, drenched in sweat and blood, lifted her chin. Her voice was steady. I didn't betray anyone. I showed mercy. But mercy has no place in your heart. What you call justice is nothing but revenge. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing. Your words won't save you. At dawn, you'll both hang from the tree. Then everyone will see what treason costs. Rough hands bound Clara and Elias's wrists with thick ropes, biting into their skin. Pain surged, but Clara's fury smothered her fear. Elias leaned toward her, his whisper barely audible. Don't be afraid. The night is long, and my brothers are waiting in the shadows. Clara turned to him, searching his eyes. But before she could reply, they were shoved forward, dragged toward the village square. The sky was black as coal. Snow drifted down in silence, the torches casting twisted shadows across the ground. Clara thought only one thing: they would not live to see the morning. Yet Elias's eyes carried a strange calm, and somehow, that calm bled into her. They were tied to a post in the center of the square. Daniel's voice rang over the crowd. This is the price of treachery. At sunrise, these two will be no more. Murmurs rippled, faces showed pity, anger, fear. Clara lifted her head, staring straight at Daniel. You won't see that sunrise, Daniel. Hatred has already blinded you. His face flushed crimson, his fists clenching with rage. And then, from the darkness of the forest, a sharp whistle pierced the night. Silence followed. Shadows moved among the trees. Figures began to emerge, silent and sure. Clara's breath hitched. Elias's eyes shone. I told you, he whispered. The night is our ally. Figures poured from the darkness of the forest, multiplying with each heartbeat. In the trembling glow of the torches, shadows stretched long across the snow. Hoofbeats pounded against the frozen earth, and the Comanche warriors advanced with silent, deadly discipline. Arrowheads gleamed, bows taut. Panic spread through the crowd. Whispers rippled among the villagers, while the militia clutched their weapons in fear. Daniel Hartman roared, Stand ready. These dogs spilled our brother's blood tonight, we wiped them out. But beneath his voice was the tremor of fear. His hand shook as he raised his pistol. Then Elias, bound though he was, rose to his feet. Blood seeped through his bandages, his breath ragged, but his gaze was steady. Stop, he shouted. His voice carried across the square, woven with the wind until it filled every corner. No more blood. We've all lost too much already. Clara tore at the ropes on her wrists, pain cutting her skin raw, but her eyes never left Elias. His words echoed through the crowd, and hesitation rippled among them. Some villagers lowered their heads, some turned away. They knew Clara. She had healed their children, stitched their wounds. And now she stood chained beside the man they called enemy. The contradiction cracked the wall of hatred. Daniel lunged forward, pressing the barrel of his pistol into Elias's chest. Your words are poison. You've bewitched this woman. You'll both hang at dawn. Clara strained against her bonds until the ropes bit into her flesh. Daniel, she cried, you don't seek justice, you only crave revenge. Your hatred is burying this village alive. I will not stain Mark's memory with more hate. Her voice rang across the square, and faces in the crowd shifted. An old man hobbled forward, leaning on his cane. Clara, he said, thin but firm, you saved my son one winter. You are no traitor. There's no betrayal in your heart. Then a woman's voice rose. You cured my child's fever. If you are guilty, then we all are. Whispers swelled into voices, voices into shouts. Daniel's face turned crimson, his eyes sparking with rage. Silence, he bellowed. You're all blind. Anyone who stands with the enemy is my enemy. He raised his pistol and pulled the trigger. But Clara threw herself in front of Elias with every ounce of strength she had. The gun cracked. The bullet tore through her shoulder. A scream ripped through the square. Clara staggered, blood dripping onto the snow, but she did not fall. Her eyes locked onto Daniel's. "Do you see, Daniel?" she rasped. Hatred always strikes the innocent. Every time. Daniel froze. His pistol trembled, then slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground. Silence consumed the square. The Comanche lowered their bows. Villagers rushed forward, some weeping, gathering around Clara. Elias dropped to his knees, bound hands reaching for her, pulling her into his arms. "Hold on," he whispered fiercely. "We'll get through this together." Daniel collapsed, broken, no longer a leader but a man undone. The only word that escaped his lips was, "It's over." But it wasn't over. Not really. For that night, the chains of hatred had cracked, and a history written in blood had been scarred by Clara's courage and Elias's defiance. Clara's eyes fluttered open. She looked into Elias's face, her lips shaping a faint whisper. "I'm not alone anymore." Tears filled his eyes as he bent close. "Neither of us are." At that moment, the storm seemed to quiet. From behind the clouds, the pale moon finally broke through. The square filled not with fear, but with silence and hope. And everyone knew, when morning came, nothing would ever be the same again. By the way, we noticed something small. Most people who watch these stories aren't actually subscribed to the channel. Maybe we get caught up in the moment, or just forget to hit the button. But your support truly helps us keep creating stories like this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.